Good morning, everybody. Welcome to your Rangers Review morning briefing. It is Tuesday, the 5th of May, the morning after the night before. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning, firstly, by Johnny McFarlane. It feels like we've just been off air for about 10 minutes, and we're back on, Johnny. It's like that Grand Theft Auto meme. Good to have you back on anyway. And Joshua comes onto the show to give us an explanation as to what we witnessed yesterday. How goes it, Joshua?
I'll try my best. I was there last night, caught up with a bit of the threes on the way home. Didn't disagree with much at all. That you saying the morning after the night before gives me a bit of PTSD, Derek, because we have done so many of these over the years. And I thought last night was bad. I think, we try and be reasonable at points and pick things apart. We'll do that today.
Yeah.
But it was just so I tweeted out after, what a meek way for your title challenge to end, and that was my main thought coming away from the game last night. We'll try, as you say, try and dissect what happened, why it happened, where does the blame lie. But ultimately, I just thought it was worryingly predictable the way that Hearts got back into that last night, and it leaves Rangers absolutely nowhere with 3 games to go.
Yeah, it does, requiring an absolute miracle, which I can't see happening, I've got to say.
It's done.
Let's just rule that out. Let's Danny
rule that out. I think I was thinking last night they could still win it, but that is just, I was thinking I'm going slightly mad, I think. So we're going to discuss. It's a bit of a post-mortem today. It was. We're on the post-match reaction. People are still very angry, understandably so. Before we get stuck in, a quick word for our podcast sponsors, Willows Fencing, the Glasgow-based fencing company you can trust, proud partners of the Rangers Review. If you need the new fences, the guys to call, folks. The all-important details are in the description below this video. Do go and check them out. Johnny, you wanted to just jump in there?
I was going to say a few fences smashed up last night in anger, I think. So Willows Fences are there to sort you out.
What if they do TVs as well? Because I'm sure there'll be a few fans heading along to some TV repair stores this morning to get their goggle boxes fixed. Right, we'll come to you first, Joshua, because myself and Johnny were on last night giving our immediate reactions, but you were there at Tynecastle yesterday. You've seen it unfold. Rangers started well, going at half-time ahead, in control. I very much expected a reaction from Hearts. I didn't expect them to be as poor as they were in the first half, but Rangers just failed to respond and deal with that change that was made at halftime with Blair Spittle coming on, and that was really all Hearts in the second half. As soon as they got their second goal, any belief I had evaporated, and I think even you could see that with the players. They huffed and puffed, but I didn't think that they actually felt they were going to get back into the game, and that's what turned out to be the case. But tell us what your assessment is of the game.
Do you know what, Derek? I think we spoke a lot after Motherwell about, I think Danny Rohl got that team wrong, and I think he did. And there's so many games now. You think of Falkirk, you think of Motherwell away, you think of Celtic in the 2-2 draw. This inability to play for 90 minutes is the pattern. That's the takeaway for me. So you try and understand why that's happening, and then you look at how Rangers have tried to approach that Motherwell game with their 2 strikers, playing their 4-2-2, playing the football that I think Danny Rohl wants to, but they were so unable to last week. I think we all said that after that Motherwell game, we expect the Rangers go to this more reactive, like 4-3-3 for the Hearts game, for the Celtic game. And they did, and it worked. I just think they're a team who lack identity. And I don't even mean that in a real, that is tactical, but I just mean Hearts last night, they knew who they were. They had stuff to fall back on. They regrouped when they were 1-0 down. Crucially, they didn't lose a second goal, as Rangers were unable to do against Motherwell the week prior. And then when the momentum changed, they were unable to shift it. I don't know, thinking about this, is this a group that have become too reliant on Danny Rohl making changes at the break that they can't adapt in game, Derek? Is this a group that have had too much information? I'm not going to go down the road of the mid-season camp is to blame for this, but a lot of the intention behind that week was working on different shapes and different ideas, and we've seen Rangers jump around a lot. I don't think that if you look at the start of the season, the football they were trying to play, trying to transition mid-season, I think they just look like an amalgamation of ideas. So when the going gets tough, when a team changes, they're unable to really adapt to that. Because you think of the difference between the first and the second half against Falkirk. You think of that Motherwell game. This is not isolated to last night. I was surprised that Rohl didn't change things earlier. And do you know the one that actually stands out to me? Scott Olsen is called for that second goal, I think. James Tavernier's pointing to him. Yeah. I thought Gassama would come on quicker because that's tended to be why Rohl has used him on the right. He's explained it in press conferences, effectively because he can become a wing back when a team plays with a back five. I was surprised they didn't come on quicker, but then just as concerningly, when that goal went in, you never really felt like Rangers were going to wrestle that momentum back. So I don't think they were brilliant in the first half. I think they were good. I think they were in control. But it's like when they become a more controlled possession team, the physicality kind of goes out the window. Do you know what I mean? It's one or the other. They're not a complete team. And the way that they were able to really bully Hearts at points in that 4-2 win was absent last night because that playing that style, it seems so reliant on the Deary and Romans. So they've jumped about so much, and in a way, I think that's what's got them back into the title race. That's the pragmatism that Danny Rohl has utilised. But when it's been on them to, as ever, a point we've repeated for years and years, set the agenda, seize the initiative, set the tempo of a game. Think back to the Scottish Cup against Celtic. When that Celtic team, who didn't even have a shot in 120 minutes, Rangers were still unable to beat them. Look at the number of draws. I think that's 12 draws over the course of the league season. They've actually only lost 4 games to Celtic's 8, but they've been unable to go for it, to seize the day, to set the tempo, to take games away from opponents. And that last night, from their inability to score a second goal to adapt in the second half, is what absolutely killed them for me.
Yeah, they're on course, incidentally, to acquire less points than they did last season. They need to acquire 6 or more, 6 to equal last season's points total. And you know how bad last season was, which is not a good look on the owners, you've got to say. Johnny?
Do you know what I find a bit baffling is that I look back over the last 10 or so games. I think Rangers centre-halves have been okay. But they've been okay individually. But 7 out of the last 9 games, they've lost more than 2 goals. It's quite remarkable. Even yesterday, the 2 goals that were conceded, you look at multiple opportunities to snuff out the chance in the build-up, and they don't do it. A lot of people blaming Tavernier for both goals. I think that's pretty heavy going. The first goal is definitely not Tavernier's fault. I've seen people saying Tavernier should be going up and pressing on to Spittle who scored the goal? Sorry, remind me.
Kingsley.
Sorry, yes, Stephen Kingsley. He should have been pressing up onto him and pushing Scott Olsen elsewhere. Tavernier's got to be defending that back post. That's what fullbacks are supposed to do. He twice tells Scott Olsen, like, mark your man, be on your man, and he doesn't do it. So, honestly, anyone who's saying that Tavernier's at fault for that, including Chris Sutton, who's 100% at it and is just trying to take a pot shot at an easy target, pathetic comments. A guy who failed at Lincoln, giving out advice to anyone. It's just rank rotten what he said last night. Disgusting comments about Tavernier. And then the second goal, look, I just think it's good play by Hearts, getting the ball back across and a wonderful finish. Yes, he could have, Tavernier could have blocked that cross, maybe. But for me, I don't look at that and think that's rank rotten defending. That's terrible mistakes. I just think that's Scott Olsen who's made an enormous mistake in the first goal, and the second one. The defenders in the centre, I think, need to get closer to Shanklin. That's the key error. I don't know what Josh thinks about that.
Yeah, I think both goals, you see the Hearts, you see the benefit of them playing with those wing backs, which they weren't really able to do in the first half, were they? I think for the first goal, Raskin actually slips at the edge of the box as he's trying to recover the ball, and then Kazaridis gets a bit of momentum, hits a good shot. But I agree with you. I think that's comes back to the Gassama point for me, Johnny, is that Scott Olsen in the first half played a couple of nice cutbacks to the edge of the box. Didn't do much. I thought he might come off at the break. Maybe that would have been harsh given Rangers were in control. But the justification often for playing Gassama on the right has been that he can effectively become a wing back in those scenarios. Now, I don't think he's a brilliant defender, but he's probably more he's probably more natural there. And what then happened for me is the reason that both centre-backs had quite a good game in the first half is they had basically an extra man. Hearts tried to go man for man at points, but as the game slowed, they weren't able to as much. And Giga loses the duel with Braga for the first goal, and I think in a moment before that, and then Shanklin runs off Manny Fernandez for the second goal. Again, is that the responsibility of the players? Yes. Should Rohl have changed things? Maybe. I don't know. I also thought if Kasama came on the right, then maybe it gives you a little bit more breakaway pace. I thought a number of players, Mikey Moore, I thought was poor last night.
Yeah.
Thought he really struggled, and that's not to single him out because he's performed.
He's not fit as well. It's obvious.
Yeah, he's been playing through pain and he's performed over and above so many times. And again, that maybe shows the difficulties with relying on an 18-year-old who is a unbelievable player, but is still an 18-year-old who's learning the game. So maybe there should have been a change at halftime. Interestingly, about 5 minutes into the second half, Rohl told Diamande to push up a line higher. And right the second half, Mark Leonard, who I think is a good player, started to get on the ball, and Hearts had a couple of attacks. And Rohl was basically saying to his team, you need to effectively press them man for man and get higher up the pitch. But it just felt like Rangers fell into this stupor. And that, again, beyond the tactics, beyond the individuals, that's what felt so kind of alarming at the game, that when both those Hearts goals went in, it was kind of like, you kind of expected that to happen.
They wanted it more than Rangers, and that's galling. You can tell they're a proper team, a united team. You mentioned Spain trip earlier, Josh. I mean, Hearts went away as well. I would like to know what Rangers were working on. That was one of the concerns of mine. They come back, and we've seen the wheels coming off before. I also think that the James Tavernier announcement, fans will look back on that, saying, was that necessary at that point as well, when he came out ahead of the club and said he's calling it a day at the end of the season. But the finger wagging is going on at this point, because it's quite clear that Rangers have blew it again. It's everyone looking now at who to blame. Danny Rohl's getting it in the neck a lot. Joshua, do you agree with that? The manager, a lot of fans now wanting to see a change on the touchline. Your thoughts on that?
Here we go again, eh? Yeah. Well, I think that it's maybe we're gonna have a long summer talking about blame again.
Yes, I know.
You got to look at a big picture, right? Because you got to look at everything from people who are no longer here. The Russell Martin era that puts Rangers in this position. You can't get away from that. You can't get away from the handling of appointing a successor and the fact that Rangers effectively, they should have had a manager in place for that Dundee United game. They could have had Danny Rohl in place. Maybe if they'd won that game, they had a couple more points, they'd be in a better position. All these factors come into it. I think the American ownership has learned quickly, but also they've been taught, I guess, harsh lessons about how difficult football is. And you look at Chelsea. There's so many examples of this happening around the world, where football is just so hard. It's so unlike any other business, and it takes time to adapt and react to. Danny Rohl also has done so well to get Rangers back into it, but of course he can't escape blame, Derek. And one of the reasons he can't is because look at how much money Rangers have spent. Look at the money that was spent in the January window to kind of supplement his football. Now, I know Romans has been injured, and I know that Nadiri has been injured, but the Skov Olsen experiment, which was internally seen as such a big move, and there's so much excitement about that, that hasn't worked. And you cannot again escape the fact that Hearts aren't going away, and Hearts haven't spent that much money compared to Rangers. And now there's a real chance that they'll have Champions League money to go with that. Celtic have had 4 managerial changes, and yet they're still in this title race, and Rangers are not. So I think the blame is multi-layered. I think it goes back beyond this season to how Rangers prepared for the summer, to that over-ambitious project. But also because of the way the structure is now, with no sporting director, Danny Rohl is the head coach, but he kind of almost publicly assumes that mantle of manager. And I think this is a real test for him, because these 3 games, Derek, this is one of the reasons managers don't like taking jobs without pre-season. And I don't know what you think about this, but you could potentially be going into the new season really as damaged goods, and already you will be in the eyes of some people. And that's a test for me. If you go to Parkhead and you win, you win a big game, you take the title away from Celtic. There's some redeeming qualities within that, although it won't feel like that this morning. I'll pass over to Jonny, but if you lose that Old Firm game and then you maybe have a kind of a friendly feeling to the final two games, a pre-season friendly feeling to the final two games of the season, that risks the mood really, I think, seeping into the summer and beyond.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Joshua. I'm not calling for Danny Rohl's head at the moment. I want to see what happens in these last three games. But what I would say is that it's not been impressive overall so far. You have to say that these last two defeats have cast a pall over everything that's come before. You can say Danny Rohl's done a good job. He's brought Rangers back in the title race, and I think there's some truth in that. There's also some truth to say Rangers have been a basket case, and he's obviously improved them because anyone would improve them. Russell Martin had a 1.1 points per game ratio. So it's inevitable that Danny Rohl was going to come in and improve them. It's also fair to say that Celtic were an utter basket case. Under Wilfred Nancy, they had a 1 point per game ratio. So even worse than Russell Martin. And Danny Rohl was up against that. That was extraordinarily fortunate. I'd also add that Hearts started like a steam train, but their form almost right the way through the season, the mid part of the season, was pretty patchy, was pretty up and down. And although they managed to maintain the lead, they certainly dropped a lot of points, which allowed Rangers to come right back roaring into it. So I think there was circumstances around what's happened that's made this a very unusual league season that I think normally would have seen Danny Rohl have almost no impact in terms of Rangers being in a title race. If Celtic were, for example, run by Martin O'Neill the whole time. Now, people may balk at that. They say Martin O'Neill's 74 years old. The facts are the facts. Martin O'Neill has 2.5 points per game since he arrived at Celtic over the two spells. Danny Rohl has 2.3. So you align those two together over the course of a whole season, Celtic comfortably win the league if Martin O'Neill's up against Danny Rohl for the whole season. That's facts. That's the truth. You know, I ultimately believe that if Danny Rohl goes out and wins Champions League, comes second, I think he's probably earned a bit more time. That will require Rangers to beat Celtic and win the other two games as well. I don't personally see that happening with this squad. And I think Rangers have a huge decision to make in the summer. They won't make it, and they're right not to make it until all the facts are in, until we get to the end of the season and see where the chips lie. But if we're talking about breaking the cycle, and everyone is referencing that, the problems that we had with Michael Beale coming in, not getting a full season, getting a start to the next season, not going well, sacked. That same thing happened with Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. The same thing happened with Philip Clement. We're talking about breaking a cycle. It's not to repeat the cycle again and pretend that Danny Rohl's going to get the full season no matter what. The way to break the cycle is to say, we are cutting this off in the summer. We are going to be ruthless. And actually, if we're talking about Rangers DNA, that would be the most Rangers DNA thing Kavanagh could do. To just say, we like Danny. He's a great guy. He's going to be a very good coach. He's shown a lot of things that make you think someone's going to get a right good manager there. If he goes to the Bundesliga, which I'm sure is his target, and maybe the Premier League down the line, I'm sure we'll look back and say, Danny Rohl's going to have a good career in front of him. I don't think he's going to be a Paul Le Guen who's going to end up in charge of Oman. You know, this is a guy with qualities. But ultimately, does he have Rangers qualities? Does he have what this job requires? The very specific things that this job requires. Because the older I get, the more I look back at the past and reflect on it and see cyclical things happening in Rangers history. And the more I think, do you know what? This club, this specific situation in this specific league, first and foremost, it needs a leader. It needs a guy who brings the whole club together, all the disparate elements, fighting for the same cause. And then under that manager, you need to basically fill in the blanks on his CV and the blanks in his skill set. If you look at the Gerrard model, when Gerrard was in, you had Gary McAllister, who was the link to the players, the positive guy in the dressing room that was getting everybody up and about. You had Tom Colshaw, who was Gerrard's right-hand man, who was able to do the set pieces. You had Michael Beale, who was the tactical brain, the modern thinker, the guy who could get on that training pitch and put on a session the players would love. They all balanced out the leadership element that Steven Gerrard brought to the table. If you look at Graham Souness, leadership element, absolutely there. The guy that brings everyone together. Who did he have alongside him? Walter Smith, a brilliant organiser, a brilliant man manager, a guy who could get on the training pitch and put on a session that top players would respect and love. That's just 2 examples. There's others. Rangers need more than just a coach. And I look at Danny Rohl and I worry, based on some of the things that we've seen this season, about his long-term viability, and if Rangers aren't just going to end up in another cycle if they leave him in charge. And Josh, I just want to put this to you. This stat was doing the rounds yesterday in a lot of places. I came up with it on the Rangers Review. He's had 14 games against the top 6. That's up against David Gray at Hibs, Derek McInnes at Hearts, John McGlynn at Falkirk, Berthel Askew at Motherwell, and Martin O'Neill. 14 games so far, 6 wins, 42% win rate. That's just not going to be ever good enough to be a Rangers manager, despite all the things that have gone against him. You know, outside of Celtic, all these clubs have a far lower budget and have a far poorer playing squad than what Rangers have.
Yeah, well, on your point about breaking the cycle, and we'll give you, I'll pass back to you in a second, Derek, but I think you're right. The question for me is this. This squad has now started. Rangers have been in this cycle for about 4 years. And part of the reason they're in this position is because the club was so built in Gerrard's image. And it's been, and ever since it's been jumping around. So you start to build a squad for a manager, you then sack that manager, you start to build a squad for the next manager, you then sack that manager, and you're just like 40, 50% behind all the time. A practical example for me, Johnny, is this. When you lose Nadiri and Romans, you can't play the 4-2-2. If Rangers had played Miovski and Magoma in the game against Hearts, the 4-2 win, I don't think they win the game that effectively. Because you don't have the squad depth to play as a manager wants to play. Then you have to either play a watered-down version of it, or as we've seen Rangers do, react and change systems all the time. Then I think you fall back on what have we got as a team. And to use the most recent example of where that worked at Rangers, what Gerrard's team always had was they had the kind of off-ball shape to fall back on. Players knew it was a bit plug in and play. They had that identity. I think Hearts have that this season. I think Celtic have the muscle memory of just winning and players who've done it before. And I think Rangers lack both. And on the big game record, that again, for me, comes back to the proactivity. I'm like you. I think these next 3 games are very big for Danny Rohl. And I do think he did a brilliant job initially to unite I know he was taking the mic off a bad karaoke singer, but also you were a couple defeats away there from the season totally spiraling out of control. But the issue with big games for me is that's when it is on you to, again, I'll come back to it, set the initiative of the game. How often have we spoken about this? Rangers still can't really play through a press. They still don't have that clear, discernible identity. And I think in games like against Motherwell, where they basically say, okay, let's have a football match, us against you, like at times against Falkirk, but crucially like that Scottish Cup game against Celtic, where it's all set up for an individual to go and seize it, or a change from the bench to win the game. They've really been unable to do that, apart from what the Hearts game, the 4-2 win, and the 2-2, again, the 2-2 draw against Celtic in the league was there was real comparisons to that. What we're talking about last night as well, with a game of 2 halves, with Rangers struggling to adapt when the game changes. So there is a pattern there. My question is, who's going to decide ultimately? Because there's no sporting director. We're now in this like football board structure again. Who makes the call as to whether it is the right thing, whether Rohl has done enough to show that he can kind of continue to be the brains behind this operation? Because my concern would be, if you go then for a manager with a different style again, as Rangers have started to build this almost like Red Bull football squad, the foundations of it, where do you turn to? And then do you fall into that cycle again of a manager playing catch up, the January window to supplement his squad? And then we'll be here having this conversation again this time next year, regardless of how much money you throw at it, because what Hearts have shown is that the amount you spend does not necessarily equate to success in Scotland.
Josh, I don't disagree with anything you've said, but here's what I would say, and just a slight retort to some of it. I think the obvious two Rangers managers are Steven Gerrard or Derek McInnes. Absolutely just no-brainers. And both those guys, if they're available, should be sought, in my view, depending on what happens in the last 3 games of the season. If Danny Rohl wins the last 3 games, I think he's done enough to be retained. And a lot will depend on those. But if Steven Gerrard or Derek McInnes is available, I think those two are obvious leaders that understand the club, the league, and what's required. And I think this is crucial, and it's not like Kevin Muscat, where it's a complete volte-face. It's not like Askew, where it's a complete volte-face. It's not a change. Both those guys play aggressive, heavy metal, powerful football, and I think a lot of the squad would fit into what they want. And those that don't, I think you could probably move on. Do I think that Ryan Nadiri is a Steven Gerrard player or a Derek McInnes player? I'd be surprised if they weren't. If he wasn't, you know.
I think that's a fair point that you need. Yeah, I'll give it back to Derek, but I think that's a fair point that there's like a general style that different managers will fit. But again, there's that big question of if Gerrard comes back in, club really built in his image, and you're pivoting all the time. That would be my worry, that you need to break the cycle. But I agree with you. These next 3 games are key, because if Danny Rohl can get second, and that's still not where Rangers should be, but it's slightly more redeeming than third, which would mean you're starting the season so early as well.
I disagree on Gerrard, incidentally. I think a lot of fans romanticise about Gerrard, just given the fact that he was the last guy to win a league title. But in that season, people forget, Rangers were dumped out 2 cups, St Mirren and St Johnstone. They should have won a treble that year. I think the
European performance with Derek.
No, I think COVID.
I
think COVID helped, because obviously the season before it got curtailed, and if you remember the Accies defeat, Hearts Cup defeat, and it looked like Gerrard at one point would be packing his bags and heading away. He did go, and obviously that season after 55 to Villa, failed. Al Ettifaq failed. I'm not entirely sure him coming back is the right move, I've got to say. Would he bring his coaching staff that he worked with at Rangers before? That would mean Michael Beale coming back, of course.
We should obviously state that at the moment that we don't.
There is a clamour. There is a clamour. I mean, in the comments you can see a clamour for fans wanting Gerrard. I'm not necessarily sure Gerrard coming back automatically makes things rosy in the garden again. That's my point on that. McInnes, in hindsight, I think I said McInnes when Martin get the bullet at the time, Rangers went. Obviously, it was a bit of a wild goose chase. They managed to get Rohl eventually, but the summer's going to be a crucial. I agree with you, and giving them the next 3 games, I think that's fair. And then an assessment has to be made in the summer whether Rangers stick or twist. But cannot keep going. I need to give a manager, for me, a pre-season. I think there was a question on the show yesterday about, is it a fitness thing, the players not being able to put in a full 90-minute performance? And I think that's a fair criticism to level at the players, because as you pointed out yesterday, Johnny, they've been training for a Russell Martin style, and then Danny Rohl comes in mid-season. It's not easy to sort of adjust.
Well, I'd love to ask Joshua about that. Obviously, Derek, we are hired quarterbacks. Joshua's in amongst the players, in amongst the management team. He knows much more about what's going on. Josh, I put it to you that one of the problems Rangers have is fitness, because the pre-season was a Russell Martin pre-season for Russell Martin football, and Danny Rohl's football is a very different animal. And those 2 things do not match. Do you agree?
Agree, and I'll tell you why. I remember speaking to a player about the change from Gerrard to Gio, and they said to me that, and it was, remember there was a terrible injury issues at that point, and there was a terrible injury issues when you went from Gio to Beale as well. Now, people will say, the professional footballers, they should be fit. And that's true. But effectively, the way it was described to me is like there's almost different types of fitness. And that's why all the small details, it's why a manager wants this performance coach instead of that performance coach. Are you training players to have the ball for 60%, 65% of the game? Or are you training players to press really aggressively, as Rohl wants, as he wants to play at that high intensity for the full 90 minutes? You watch the way that Bayern Munich and PSG played last week. that's a very different style to maybe have an Arsenal play. And all these small details are tweaked as a result. And the way it was explained to me was, even for players changing their recovery day, that can have a big impact on injury and fitness. I think during the Clement era, the fact that there wasn't that sporting director ahead of him as well at points meant that he kind of became the almost like de facto head of sporting director as well as a manager too. Whereas sometimes I think it's like any organisation, and you need different people making decisions for the betterment of a player. Now, people will get upset at that. They'll say sports science is picking the team, and I understand that to a point. However, that's also how you keep someone like Dujon Sterling, who's been injury-free for probably the longest spell of his Rangers career, because he's played in one position and he's been managed. So I think that is a factor. And I also think then that comes down to Rohl has clearly tried to be more proactive, right, since the January window. That's why Rangers went for this Ryan Nadiri profile, the kind of build-up striker. That's why they went for Ture Romans, because they wanted to move to a more proactive style that worked against Hearts and worked for a period against Celtic. And it's fine margins. If Romans scores that goal against Celtic, maybe we're having a different discussion. But I think the floor of Rangers' performance in that 4-2-2-2 is varied so much, hasn't it? And there's not been, like in that Celtic game, like in the first half against Motherwell, maybe like on-pitch leadership to say, right, we are struggling here, let's just stay compact. Let's keep it together for 30, 40 minutes. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of identity. Whereas I think if it's, again, to relate to a Gerrard team who's been there for a few years, who's built the squad up, who are used to his methods, who are equipped physically for those methods, there is the kind of shelf to fall back on during the game. I don't think it's coincidental that Danny Rohl started by a lot of the early time for him in the job was about tactical tweaking and the changes he made at Parkhead. I don't think it's coincidental that then we've almost seen almost like a bit of a reliance on that, instead of players on the pitch sometimes going, right, what do we need here to get through the next 10 minutes to survive this game, to just squeeze the points out, because that is something that we've seen time and time again in games.
It's about levels, though, isn't it? I mean, you talk about Danny Rohl's tactical performance at Parkhead with 3-1 win, and it was excellent. But he was up against Wilfred Nancy. He had a look at them in that first half. Celtic were unlucky not to be out of sight, to be honest. Rangers were very poor. But he got them in at half-time. He adjusted it. He looked at what Celtic were doing, and it looked like a tactical masterclass on that day. What I would say is, if you look at the results against Askew, against O'Neill, those to me are the best two managers in the league. I don't want to be disrespectful to John McGlynn, because he's done an incredible job at Falkirk as well. Right, McInnes as well, yeah, obviously, goes without saying. Those results, Joshua, they are really worrying. Like, and it's not just the results; it's the pattern of these games. Have Rangers kind of dominated any of those games, even the ones they've won? If you're talking about the 6 wins that they've had, the 4-2 against Hearts, I think Rangers were the better team for most of that game. That's the one game, but I certainly wouldn't say they dominated.
But that's Johnny. I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you. And I listened to what you guys were saying last night about like what are Rangers effectively. But that's my core point, is that they've and that's part of the difficulty that Rohl inherited, right? Because he inherits a team that were just absent. They were trying to do something that didn't work, an idea that didn't carry. So what do they fall back on? So how do they control that game against Motherwell? We spoke about it on the Saturday show this week, right? But they want to play direct. They want to play into 2 strikers. But when they are unable to do that, when Motherwell scored the first goal, they have such a lack of tools. And that's why we've talked about the Russell Martin experiment, at length. The core idea of that, as misguided as I think the implementation of it was, the core idea of it was Rangers are probably going to have the ball for 60-65% in the majority of games. What are they going to do with it? Because teams aren't going to give them the space for free. And if you look at how Celtic have won repeated leagues, it's because they've had a clear idea of what they do on the ball. And that's the big games is where that's been isolated, because it's effectively my idea against your idea. Motherwell aren't compromising to Rangers. They're saying we're going to play our game. And aside from that Hearts game, there's not really been a big win. And although Rangers were able to do it for 50 minutes against Celtic, when it changed, they either weren't able to change it from the bench, or they weren't able to fall back on something on the pitch. So I totally agree with you. That's the core issue. And then it comes into, well, how do you solve that? Do you give a manager time to implement it? But if you do, you better make sure he's the right one, because otherwise it's going to be wasted time, as eventually happened under Philippe Clement.
I mentioned last night, guys, that Askew has not been discussed. He's been discussed ad infinitum for Celtic, but no one's talked about him as a potential future Rangers manager. And thinking that's something that needs to be remedied. It's an idea that needs to be pushed. I suppose my main feeling against it really is I just don't feel that kind of football as Rangers. I don't feel that that's what is responded to at this club. If you look at the history of the club, I feel like the Danny Rohl style, not that there's been a massive amount of evidence of it, but I think the idea of being up and at them, aggressive, man for man, power, set plays, I feel that's kind of in the Rangers' DNA. I think that's a good idea, and I think that the notion of a German coach playing a kind of gegenpressing, a modern gegenpressing, I think there's an alignment there. But I think the problem with Askew, and I don't know if you agree with this, Joshua, or not, we've already had one failed experiment of this type of football at Rangers, and look, you can point to Russell Martin and his him being a bad fit overall for a number of reasons. But part of me just wonders if like that kind of patient style of football, that kind of, I don't know, possession orientated, pummel the team to death with possession, I just don't really think that is something that gets the pulse racing sort of historically, and gets a Rangers crowd up and at them, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, no one on the channel wants to see a team keep the ball more than me, but it took Motherwell until October to start winning. Just like that rules it out right away. They've won one of their last 8.
The weekend.
Yeah, it's. I think what this season shows is the continuing uniqueness of Rangers, which is what makes it great, which is what makes it challenging. I agree, and there was a long running argument or debate, as I understand it, this time last year about do Rangers go for a Red Bull style coach? I think they were a bit scarred by the verticality of the Clement era, for want of a better word. Or do they go for a high possession coach? That sometimes we can get caught up in the blacks and whites of that debate, and there's a lot of grey areas. I think you do need a coach who's a bit adaptable, but fundamentally you need a coach who can give a team an identity, and that takes time. And this is why coaches don't want to take jobs mid-season, because often by the time it gets to the new season, you're scarred from the season before. And that's effectively the debate we're having, right? Has Danny Rohl done enough to have a continuing rebuild done with not just his footballing vision, but in line with his footballing vision?
Yeah.
And on the big game then, as I'll give it back to you, Derek, but on the big game point, that's why I think Sunday is so massive. Because if he goes and he wins there, yes, he's not going to win the league title, but that there's something there to hold on to. If you go and don't win there, I think the noise will be very, very loud.
Yeah, this is an issue that me and Johnny talked about in the show yesterday. I wanted to put it to you because Ali McCoist has been speaking on Talk Sport this morning about Rangers, saying that they look mentally weak. He says, I'm saying they've got nothing to play for, which is a ridiculous statement when it's a Celtic v Rangers game, but I'm not sure they are mentally strong enough. That is the only thing that would concern me. He also said, first thing I wrote down, no Scotsman. It's incredible. You can say what you like, but it matters. It's a big thing. It's a massive thing. Was filled with Scotsmen, whether it was Gough, Gorham, McCall, Durrant, and Brown. I could name you 8 in the team. To be fair, it was littered with top-class Europeans and others around it, but you've got to have Scotsmen in your team. They know what it is all about. So there's Super Ali speaking about the need for Scots in that team, of which there were none yesterday. And I've got to say, I think there should be more than none. Thoughts?
Derek, just want to jump in there. I agree with everything that Ali said. We talked about this stuff last night. I know Josh is going to come in and call us, old farts. That's not the point. But one thing I want to say is, I totally disagree with Ali. There's nothing left to play for. There's a Champions League spot to play for. Yeah. Celtic are 4 points ahead with a game against Celtic next, right?
And do you want Celtic to win the league?
Play hard and Motherwell.
Yeah.
So I totally disagree with that. There is stuff to play for now. The different question is, do any of us believe that Rangers, the way they're playing at the moment, can go and win 3 games in a row? Yeah, okay, I take that on board, but there is still stuff to play for. So, Josh, come in.
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Who am I to disagree with Super Ali? But no, I'm joking. Well, let me ask you both.
Yeah.
Who do you think in this squad, if everyone's fit, who do you think is kind of most emblematic of what you're talking about, the club's DNA? And club DNA does matter. Okay, I'm not the most. I don't subscribe to it quite as much as Johnny, but I do subscribe to it. It doesn't matter. What player in that squad do you think upholds those values the most?
What do you mean by values? Like winning
The
mentality?
traditional Rangers. I know exactly what he's asking.
Yeah. Who's a Rangers player in that squad, Derek, that you think in another squad could be a Rangers player? Who just looks like a Rangers player, plays like one?
Well, not right now,
Not
but
any.
Tab.
Okay, Johnny?
No, there's 2 players that obviously stand out. I think would be better in better teams: Nico Raskin and Emmanuel Fernandez.
Well, for me, you've both failed my test. I was going to say Ture Romans, right? Ture Romans is someone who's come into the club, who very quickly he's played like he's got it. Do you know what I mean? He has the qualities that you would say traditionally a Rangers player should have. Is that fair? Yeah,
I think it's look. I think Romans has been really impressive, but I mean, how many games are we talking about?
Yeah. Okay. No, I agree, but just work with me for this point.
Yes.
Okay.
I agree that you need a Scottish core, and I think Celtic have had that with even if they've not always had a ton in the starting 11, they've had a few within the building. And again, Alan McCoist knows that much better than me. I think we can get too caught up in it at points, and I think if Rangers sign 4 or 5 more players in that Ture Romans mould, who are good players but play in a way that appeases the fans, play in a way that suits the club, I think they'll be in a much better position. I think that if you look at Luke Graham, who we've reported that Rangers are quite keen on ahead of the summer, Elliot Watt, another Scottish player who we believe that Rangers are keeping an eye on. They want a number 6. Remains to be seen if anything concrete happens there. He's obviously got a lot of interest because of his performances. I agree that, firstly, there's a lot of work to do this summer, and secondly, you need a few Scottish players in there, if just for the UEFA quota, but you do in general. However, I also look at, I don't know, Claudia Braga last night. I know Hearts had Shankland and Kingsley, but he was one of the most impressive players for me just because of how he, much like I think Romans can give in the future for Rangers more, because you're right, Johnny's not played that much football, has the ability, but almost understands the nuances of the Scottish game and can rise to them and not let them bring his game down. So it's not that I don't think Rangers should sign Scottish players. Of course they should. I don't think that those qualities are only exclusive to them, and I would expect that they sign a couple from the Scottish Premiership this summer.
Yeah.
I think Romans is a right good player, and we've seen that over his short period in the team, and he's definitely been missed. He is an upgrade on Magoma.
Huge.
I think Magoma's pretty good. He's been sort of 5 or 6 out of 10. He's okay. You know, he performs at a level that I would say is acceptable. But Romans has been a clear upgrade up to, I would say, like a 7 or 8. And I think will be a big player next season, provided he can obviously stay fit. But I'm seeing a lot of people in the comments saying Ture Romans, future Rangers captain and all that. I just think I think we just steady the horses. I don't think we're quite at that stage yet. That's my own personal view. People will disagree. But I think in time, with the right support around them, some of Rangers' good players, I think, would be better in a better team. And that's the point I was trying to make when I mentioned those 2, Fernandez and Raskin. I think they're both right good players, but I think kind of let down by some of the guys around them. Nico Raskin, one of the things, I thought he was poor yesterday. Good in the first half, but second half, poor. I think Nico Raskin is suffering a little bit in the way Barry Ferguson suffered in his second spell at Rangers. Now, Barry was slightly different because he was diminished. I think physically, he'd had a lot of injuries, and wasn't the same player as he was the first time round. But Barry used to run about doing things that weren't his role. You know, he was desperate to try and get on the ball, to make things happen, to be Captain Courageous and do everything. And I think sometimes in that second spell, he would have been better just focusing on what he was absolutely brilliant at, which was dictating the tempo of a game and playing out from the base of midfield. I find Nico Raskin a little bit like that. He's trying to do lots and doesn't accomplish sometimes all that much because he just doesn't have an awful lot of discipline around him. And, you know, again, you look at Diamandi, I thought was really good in that first half, and then second half, just didn't think made an impact. And I'm going to have to watch the game back a second time because apart from, what I really can't get my head around, and again, I would put this back to Josh, is I can't get my head around that such a small tactical change from Derek McInnes made such an enormous change to the game. You know, I thought Rangers were really good in that first half. They didn't create loads and loads of chances. It wasn't a 3 or 4-0 first half. But I just thought all the intangibles, the stuff that we're talking about here, about the Rangers DNA, about power, pace, aggression, dominating your man. I thought Rangers did all that in the first half and were unlucky not to go in at halftime 2-0 down. But in the second half, Hearts reversed it so much, they actually deserved the win in the end, I thought.
Yeah.
And I don't quite understand how such a small tactical tweak made so much of a difference.
I think because they didn't have the extra... The first half, you watch that period of possession from like 30 to 40 minutes, where Chukwueze, who I thought was poor, was getting the ball a lot from
Really
centre halves. Rangers had a kind of 3v2 or a 4v2 at the base of the pitch, which meant that they could build up. Hearts tried to go man for man at the start. For whatever reason, Chesnikov wasn't able to replicate what Spittle did, but I don't think he was as central off the ball. But then that means Rangers have the extra man. They can be a bit more patient in possession. And then when the ball breaks from the edge of the box, they have the extra man to keep them there. So you've got only one of Shankland and Braga on the two Rangers centre-backs. So the momentum keeps. When Hearts then go man for man after the break, and again, I thought Jack Butland's kicking was poor, then you don't have... Your out ball is effectively Butland. So you have a 3v3 at the top of the pitch. That's why I think Gassama should have come on earlier. I thought Mikey Moore had a poor game, as you can see, clearly playing through a bit of pain, Johnny. And that was the simple change for me. So Rangers then probably had more space at the top end of the park, but they sat off, which I think is why then Diamandi was pushed slightly higher up the pitch, because Rohl effectively said he wanted his team to replicate that second half performance. And that's what he told them in the dressing room at half time. I guess the criticism of that may be it was different conditions because of how Hearts were playing. Rangers don't have that ability to play it under pressure man for man. We saw that against Motherwell. They don't have the solutions. We saw it against Falkirk in the first half there as well. Then they lose their control. Then they start to get pinned back. And then the game starts to be played on Hearts terms. That's sort of how I saw it. But I thought watching a wee bit of the game back, what was a bit damning was not going for that second goal in the first half. And I don't think they really came close to it. In open play,
they're not good enough.
Mikey
Not,
Moore the
not
one
on the edge.
But can you think, Derek, of any? Like Mikey Moore flashed one across the face of goal, but can you think of other moments?
Just the hitting the bar with Asgard's header. That was basically about it in that game.
Yeah.
The other thing I suppose that I should have added as well is, and I was fortunate enough to spend an hour in Derek McInnes' company at an event recently where he was he's kind of talking to Hearts fans, and I was there as part of my job, and he is a guy who he's one of those guys who has the ability to capture your attention. He's got charisma and he holds a room, and he's got the ability, I think, to get young men running through brick walls for him. And I think he would have gone in there, and I think he talked about it in the post-match press. He would have gone in there and given a stirring speech that would have got the Hearts players up for it. And let's be honest, they looked like their blood was up when they came out for that second half. Now, all this sort of stuff is intangible, it's imprecise, and if you've got an analytical mind, I understand there's a temptation to kind of push it to one side and say, well, how can you prove that? It's improvable. But I would honestly say for anyone watching this, see if you spent an hour listening to Derek McInnes talk football, you wouldn't have any doubts about him as a football guy or a football manager. He's very, very articulate, very tactically savvy, prepared to defend his corner, and has that thing about him where you go, he's a leader of men in that traditional Scottish fashion.
Yeah.
So I think there'll be an element of that in it as well. Danny Rohl, we don't know what he's like in the dressing room. He's a very calm presence, certainly in post-match press conferences.
He's also just embarking on his managerial career. I mean, I'm sure Derek McInnes made loads of mistakes when he started off at St Johnstone, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the thing. Rangers have got a project manager and a project squad, and the owners treating the club a bit like a project where they need guys for the here and now.
And that's the question, isn't it? How do you balance the demands of Rangers with the demands of the project? Because however tied up Kavanagh becomes as the owner, however tied up the 49ers become in the notion of Rangers as an attractive proposition to them, however big Rangers fans they become, and it's quite obvious that Kavanagh's been, bitten by the bug. He's here all the time. I think here a lot more than he was expecting to be. He talks so passionately about the club when, from what I can understand, privately and publicly, when he meets with journalists. But I wonder, this idea of the project, this idea of how do the Americans make money out of Rangers? A big part of that is going to be through player trading. That has to be at the core of their model. But how do you align that notion of becoming a player trading club with Rangers as we know it as being an entity that is supposed to be and designed to be winners in Scottish football? I think there has to be a much better balance between people who can cope with the league and cope with the demands, cope with the refereeing, cope with the physicality, cope with the weather, and these type of project players like Gassama, like Diamande, who's certainly got talent but is very mercurial. I could name 5 or 6 of the players that are like that. Very few of them are like two Romans that have come in and just look like a Rangers player from the get-go. So I would put that to Josh, like how do you find a better balance? Because I think that's crucial.
I actually thought Chermiti was quite good in the first half last night.
He was good in the first half.
Blair was giving him pelters in the car on the way home, and
doesn't score enough. But that's the end of the day. Rangers don't have.
It doesn't. Yeah, but I thought his hold up was better in the. I think you can see he's improved as a player.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know at this point. I think that if you look at the squad as a whole, you're right that there's a lack of the whole leadership group needs rehashed, doesn't it? I think Rangers need a new goalkeeper in the summer.
It needs binned.
I think, yeah, I think it's time for kind of fresh energy there, isn't it? So I think you need still got that issue of the spine of the squad. You still got the issue of who's your midfielder who, presuming Raskin, if Raskin doesn't stay, who's your midfielder who plays every single game? And who's your midfielder who plays at the base midfield? I think Manny Fernandez can be that defender, but is he going to stay? I think Rangers need a new goalkeeper, as I've just said. I think Chermiti can grow into. I think Chermiti could score 20 goals next season.
Clip that up.
I don't disagree with Josh on that. I have to jump in and give it
11.
I back that hot take. I've seen enough. See if Danny Rohl had shown the same trajectory as Chermiti, then he wouldn't be under pressure.
Yeah. Do you not think he can score 20
as the season goes on? There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree, Derek. He's not a.
He has improved. He has improved. He was so far off it to begin with. So Danny Rohl deserves credit for that.
And he's 21, right? So and this is his first real full season. He's played 2 seasons with injuries.
Yeah.
But again, I'm looking at it, and I think I get a conversation I was having with someone recently about leaders give people room to grow, right? And on that pitch, I think you still need 3 or 4. I think James Tavernier's done that with performance at points throughout his Rangers career. He's clearly past his best. You still need 3 or 4 players who get everyone together when you need a bit of a siege mentality, who take the ball under pressure, who score a goal out of nothing, who relieve the pressure. Hearts' big players did stand up last night. Shanklin stood up in that second half. Braga stood up in that second half. And I think Rangers lacked that. So that would be my reply to that. I still think you need a core. I think you need fresh leadership. There's too many. It's going to be too many scars for some.
Scots in there.
Leadership. Yeah,
ideally,
and you need to look at a few who you can build around next season. I would say Chermiti is in that bracket. I still think that striking position as a whole hasn't improved from last season. But you need is Chukwani going to be the midfielder who you build around for the next 3 years? I'm not sure. I don't think he's going to upgrade on Diamandi. Yeah, so you probably need 3 or 4 guarantees, which is what someone like Cherny gave you last season, Johnny. He was a guarantee. He took the pressure off. He scored low quality chances. I think Rangers have relied on like Mikey Moore being that player this season, and he's been brilliant. Last night a step too far, but I do think he was carrying a bit of an injury. But he's also someone who probably shouldn't have been relied upon as heavily as he has been.
Lots of comments coming in. I'm conscious of the time, so I'll batter through some of them. Thank you.
Let's not worry about the time.
We
need to get to the nub of these issues.
No sweat. We'll stay on for as long as you want. Paul kindly donated to the channel. He says it's time for Rohl to go. There's a point as well from the UFO podcast. It's also donated. January was crucial. We signed injured players.
They weren't.
But listen, Robbins and Nadiri have been big misses for Rangers.
Yeah.
I think that.
But they didn't sign them knowing that there was going to be injury problems to the extent that we've had, and clearly, if they'd known that, then they might have made different decisions. You're wanting those 4 players that were brought in the January window to come in and perform.
Yeah,
and I tend to agree with Josh. I think if those players hadn't been injured, Rangers would have performed better because they are kind of fundamental to the style that Danny Rohl is playing. So,
yeah.
Listen, my bigger problem around January was I just didn't think they spent enough. I think they needed to spend a bit more. And it's so easy for me to say it's not my money. You've got to be careful and make sure it's within
it's a tough window, Johnny, as well.
It's a tough window, but I just felt that the scale of the opportunity was worth pouring money into. And I think if Rangers had another really good striker, and they may have been closer to the title than they are right at this moment. Derek, I've been very positive about Chermiti earlier on. The man you famously called, said he looked like a YouTuber.
He did after that game against Braga. I stand by that.
And listen, I didn't really defend him that much when you said that, because I thought he was looking hopeless. But you have to hold your hands up with Chermiti and say there's still issues with his play, but he is definitely on a upward curve. He's definitely performing better. He looks like he's more comfortable. I think he's causing more problems. His hold-up play is pretty good. He needs to score more goals, but you see the quality of the goals he has scored, particularly against Celtic, have been absolutely fantastic. So I would defend Chermiti, defend the signing of Chermiti. I think Thelwell has got that one right, as in a player that's worth investing in, that's going to have a high ceiling. And I have to put my hands up and say I called that wrong. And I'm happy to say that now. I think Joshua was right. Chermiti is a player with real talent. There's a bigger question, though, whether or not Rangers needed a more experienced player alongside him.
Well, the project,
given that Miovski just hasn't really worked. I don't think Miovski fits the real style.
Joe, I think if you had... I don't think Miovski's been better than Dessers. I think Dessers is a better player than Miovski. And I just think you needed... I just think you needed more guaranteed goal. But that goes back to last summer when there was this, I think as many people have admitted since, this overcommittal to like an idealism that wasn't based on the fact of, but we need someone to score goals tomorrow as well as 6 months down the line. Yeah. So it's all these small decisions. Maybe if you have that, you have a more rounded striking component. We saw, for example, how long it took Manny Fernandez to get up to speed. He had an injury as well. I think that you can't say that. Like, Andrew Kavanagh's not had his head in the sand this season whatsoever. And I would imagine that all of these games will inform what Rangers do in the summer. It's a very different executive setup. It's going to be interesting to see how that works. But I think we're all in agreement that you do need that. And Rangers have needed this for so long, that as well as spending the money on projects or players who will be there, you need the money on the likes of Cherny, which Skov Olsen was supposed to be. who then allow these other players to grow. Because I think what you've had so often is everyone trying to lead one another, but no one having that guaranteed output that a Chermiti. I'm trying to think of someone other than a Chermiti has had. Tavernier in the past.
Sema was another one that was available in the summer
Sema.
for an affordable rate, £4 million.
He turned Rangers down the season before.
Yeah.
He turned Rangers down the season before. So I think that's a bit...
Yeah, it's football manager talk. There's no doubt about it. But the Rangers the season before were a different animal to what they were last season in terms of financial power with this new ownership behind them. Just talking about the strikers, Derek, and I think it's an important point to make. There's no doubt that there's talent in that striker pool. We've seen Miofsky be a very, very effective player for Aberdeen. He is the top scorer for Rangers this season, I think. He has shown himself to be a very good finisher at times. Chermiti we've already discussed. But, and this is an important but, you look at that strike trio of last season, Igamani off the left, Dessers up front, Kearney on the right wing. I'll put it to the both of you. Do you think that this Rangers squad, with those three added, would have won this league?
I think they'd have had a better chance.
I think they'd have more points.
Yeah.
Absolute no-brainer. If you think that Dessers scores 25 goals a season, 20 to 30 goals a season, and Cherny, I think, comfortably scores 15, taking out Igaman, who is a mercurial talent, you never know what you're going to get. I still think in terms of quality, that trio is better than what Rangers have right now, and it would allow Mikey Moore to be in and out. You know, Rangers sold Dessers for, I think, 2.5 million, something like that, 3 million.
About 3 million, yeah. About 3 million.
Igaman went for kind of a contractual amount that was in his contract for about 10 million-ish.
Mm.
Yep.
You know, it wasn't actually in the context of what was spent that much money that saw those two players go out the door. And then Cherny, I just thought that was one that you just had to make happen because it was you're basically signing a player that's guaranteed to be one of the best in the league, in the top 3 players in the league, based on his performances last year. And I think he's gone and proven that in Turkey. He's been excellent, hasn't he? So I think it would have been difficult. It would have been expensive. The club were right to point that out at the time, and I think privately they have. But you look at the money that's been spent to try and replace the goals, and I don't think it's turned out to be the correct economy. I think it's been a false one.
No, they've not been as good. There's a lovely donation that's came in, a $5 from TSR FC 1997. It says, one man can take this club on. We aren't a tactical club. We are work ethic and morals. It's how we are brought up, not what's brought in. Rule out, Del in is what he says on that one. There's a point here from Daniel. He says, Derek, what happened to John Suter yesterday? Not even on the bench. Is that possibly a knock, Joshua? I don't think Daniel mentioned it pre-match.
Yeah, he mentioned at his press conference he had an injury which I believe could keep him out for a couple of games. So that's why he wasn't in the squad yesterday.
Yeah. So there you go. That's that cleared up. And Tongo gets in touch, says, Derek's fed up and now needs an espresso. Yes, I'll be going and making myself one after this. What has been a bumper
Derek.
show today. Over an hour. Holy moly. Yes, Johnny.
Do you know how bad things
Johnny
are today?
has another point to make.
This is how bad things are today. We just received this message. Oh, sorry, it's not that one. Where is it? This one. That's when you know things are very bad.
Hey, let's go.
Bring him home.
Where's Rabbi Matondo? Where's Rabbi Matondo in all this?
Everyone's got a day to get on with now.
I've not even seen if
he's not going. He's Bran. He's at Bran.
Brandbergen, yes, he's at Brandbergen, and he's there. Rangers have cut ties with him. They cut his contract early. It was up in the summer. So he's joined Bran. Of course, the Norwegian league starts off earlier than most other leagues. So, I'm not too sure if he has been playing, incidentally, but good old move for him out there. I think they're a decent club. Well, you've seen earlier this season when Rangers were turned over there. But, I wonder if Rangers could be playing them in the Conference League next season. You looking forward to that, guys? Conference League campaign?
Can't think about it yet.
There's a lot of football to be played, Derek.
Exactly.
Number one, and I think this is important to stress, because if the players have the attitude that this is this league's done and that there's nothing worth playing for, then
they'll start playing probably.
It will be the Conference League. I do think that, is it not Celtic have to lose to Dunfermline in the Scottish Cup final for it to be Conference League? Otherwise, it would be Europa League. But again, and people think I'm having a pop at Celtic. I'm absolutely not. I'm just repeating what Celtic fans say. I wouldn't put it past Dunfermline to beat Celtic, because I think Celtic on their day are a flaky, erratic team. And it is the worst squad that club has had in decades. So, I mean, it's not impossible. It's absolutely not impossible. Rangers could be plying their trade in the Conference League. And, you know, that's going to be challenging, I think, to get up for, given the European quality that we've seen at Ibrox over the last few years. You know, performances against truly good clubs like Porto and Fenerbahce, and there's a whole list of them. Galatasaray, you know, then going up against
That's another thing. This year has been an utter disaster in Europe. And again, it doesn't look good for the new ownership coming in, and given Rangers' record in Europe in years gone by, and then getting beat off teams that they should have been wiping the floor with. So, yeah, it's been a truly disappointing campaign. There's no doubt about it. And the quicker we can get to the end of it and rebuild again, the better, probably. Let's just hope they can put a spanner in the works on Sunday. A huge game for Rangers. They've got to get themselves up for that, but we'll look more in depth at that towards the back end of the week. Those of you that are Rangers Review Extra members, incidentally, we'll be back for that. We'll do the Q&A show at 1 p.m. this afternoon. My good chum Ali's joining us from across the pond, so he'll give us his view on what he witnessed yesterday, and put out the request for questions. Get them in, folks, and we'll get through as many as we can. But we'll wrap up the briefing for now. Big thank you to Jonny and to Joshua. As you all said your piece, happy with that, guys? Jonny, have you got anything else you want to get off your chest?
Well, what's that? Nearly 2 hours in the last 13 or 14. So I think my gas is at a peak now.
He'll still give me a call this afternoon to speak about some Rangers. There'll be a new point by then.
Yes, I'll have a new hot take.
New hot take.
Let's be honest, we could do 3 hours this morning. We could easily do 3 hours this morning. You know, provided the comments were coming in to guide us in different directions. There's so much to chew over and so much to think about. And I suspect in the coming weeks, not months, weeks, we will have a much better understanding of where the club is.
Yeah.
It's still a massive, massive game, even though the league's done. It's huge. And let's see how they get on in that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, folks, we'll speak to you later on. If we don't chat again, enjoy your Tuesday, whatever you are up to. And we'll chat later. Bye for now.